whipping through the 8th of December issue of Transport in the Time of COVID-19, jam-packed, so let's crack on with it. Usual email to get the slides from me or feed me info. And the theme this week is Kensington High Street. I know other people are going to talk about it, but I'm going to nip through it a bit. Okay, so, yeah, here's some things that seem to have got into animations. Here's some articles. Everybody's been reading this one by Alex Dyer. There's a competition by Mark Philpotts on the best piece of cycling infrastructure in the UK. It's very, very complicated. I don't understand how it works, but there it is. There's news about the Rosamund Kissy Deborah, her daughter Ella, who died from asthma, about whether air pollution, poor air quality should go on death certificate as cause of death. It will be a first if it does. It's in the news for a couple of weeks, as I said last week. Today, a learned professor said that her admissions to hospital couldn't be directly correlated with poor air quality. So this may end up with it not being registered as cause of death. The case was used on a very poor piece of broadcasting by BBC Radio 4 World at 1. They linked that case to low traffic neighborhoods, and Mark Treasures tweeted on this to describe how bad it is. Article on one of the many things wrong with electric vehicles in The Guardian there. Last week I pointed out that Mark, the ranty highwayman, raised the question about whether mobility scooters could be used in cycle lanes, and I gave the impression that they now could, but that is apparently not the case. There was an unsatisfactory answer to his question. You can see on Vimeo the Active Travel Media Awards, which myself and Brian got a special award on. If you want to see a very good website put up by people supporting a local low traffic neighborhood, go to this one, Low Traffic Highbury, which has just been put up by some people in Islington. And this, I know the people behind putting up the website, and it could be very good. So that's one to go to, Low Traffic Highbury. An article in the Hackney Citizen about how someone originally opposed an LTN in her area, but then became willing to accept it and shifted from driving to cycling. So that's another bit of evidence for us. Nice thread from Leo Murray about the UK aim of 68% cut in emissions, and a lot about how those of us been campaigning for ages get used to bad news. So when something comes through which is a bit better but not anything like as good as it should be, how do we react to that? So that's your new reading. Question from Thomas Tugendhat to the Secretary of State for Transport on how many and what proportion of trial schemes have been withdrawn by local authorities since the allocation of tranche 1 of the emergency active travel funding. Don't forget that on Friday the 13th, we had phase 2 awarded. And Mr. Heaton Harris said, the Active Travel Fund will deliver over 400 cycling schemes. I don't know if that's just cycle lanes or whether it includes low traffic neighborhoods. And he said 10 local authorities have notified the department they've removed schemes in tranche 1, and they're aware that many others have modified schemes or reprioritized funding in response to feedback. So you can read into that what you think, but there's your official answer from the junior minister, Secretary of State. Okay, some victim blaming. Congleton Police Here's the team taking part in the traffic operation, focusing on drivers passing dangerously close and talking to cyclists about being highly visible on the roads. I noted usual false equivalence, balancing on the one hand a polite request not to break the law by endangering other human beings, and balancing that with telling the victims of such endangerment, in this case, part of the sorry mate, I didn't see you because I wasn't looking, didn't care, to actually go along with that, to collaborate with it. So it's false equivalence and polite request to do something and then kind of go along with that thing. Interesting to see that the two cyclists there aren't actually in high vis, but hey, so what? It is nice to see when this stuff comes up on Twitter, lots of people piling in. Also up north today on Crew Nub News, they said officers posed as cyclists. Oh, you know, would they say that about drivers, posing as a driver? And they stopped 7 motorists and 7 riders. They didn't actually charge any of the motorists with anything. So it's a kind of, again, a false equivalence, which some of the people up north got annoyed about. Well done them. And in Lincolnshire, they come up with this nonsense, non-evidence-based, and I've asked Chief Superintendent Andy Cox to have a word with the police officers involved. Someone asked them where the evidence was, and apparently it comes from a French cycling holiday company. Martin Porter, the cycling lawyer, always worth following. Interesting couple of paragraphs. If you're on a bicycle and deliberately flout the law, so on brakes, and cause serious injury, you probably get charged under this as a serious offence. But if in a car you deliberately flout the law, say no right turn, you get charged with a minor offence. And that was with regard to a motorcyclist being seriously injured by a right turning car turning against the no right turn instruction. We've got a regular women's slot. That's big news on diversity. Delay slide is now the where are we now after Friday the 13th. Nip through this and just point out the main thing that I'm going to be hammering on about is where is Active Travel England? Yes. Okay, on the ground in the UK. That's the protest against taking out the Shoreham cycle lanes, protest at them being taken out by West Sussex County Council. Nice picture there. In Manchester, Deansgate is to reopen for buses. At the moment, there's no motor vehicles at all. Action is being taken against Manchester City Council by the bus company involved. In Leeds, Elfin Safety, that old one's been mentioned. They're the elves and they put a bit of glitter on the old planters. In London, here's some figures about casualties and what's been happening during lockdown. And really, this is all about motorists taking less care when there was less congestion. Talked about that before when it was happening. Going to nip through it quick because we're jam-packed today. Some more figures from Councillor Burke in Hackney. He's suggesting, by looking at this bit here at the end on the brown line, that there's a low traffic neighbourhood effect which has boosted cycling in Goldsmiths Row. That's just from the last month, so don't know if you can read too much into it. And here's a picture from TfL about their latest plans for Westminster Bridge. According to LCC, this should have gone in about, or something good should have gone in about 3 years ago. It's about provision for cycling and dealing with the terrorist threat by having heavy bollards. that will be better than the present situation. In Brent, we've got 2 low traffic neighborhoods in. There's one of our first bollards. And Ruth sent me this of C9 being constructed on Kew Bridge in Hounslow. Right, here's the story. Kensington and Chelsea, the lanes came out. These were they. Do look at what Last Not Lost has been saying about it. They have been coming up with such nonsense. They are the gift that keeps on giving when it's poor justifications for their behavior. This slide went up last week. Tory MP saying that lanes are good. Comments from Simon Munk, Jeremy Vines getting stuck in. Steve Norris described the protesters wanting the cycle lanes in as zealots, and Danny Williams said the zealots include the CEO of Royal Albert Hall, CEO of Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, Provost of Imperial College, 3 local schools, various local businesses. We've had all the stuff about how there were dodgy petitions from outside the borough opposing them. Stop Killing Cyclists have been saying that the Daily Mail's been lying. 58% of the first emails received by Kensington Chelsea Council were in favour, and so on and so on. A lot of these quotes were up last week. And there is the good article by Peter Walker, which was quoted last week, plus the demonstration last Tuesday, which I mentioned here. Since that time, 2nd of December, London Extinction Rebellion and Stop Killing Cyclists had a demonstration involving sitting on the contractor's van. There's Ruth. And they then went on to the headquarters of the Daily Mail, which is just nearby. That was on the Wednesday. And Stop Killing Cyclists again accused Daily Mail of getting it all wrong. And the Ross Lydell of the Evening Standard also accusing people of misrepresentation. On Thursday, I went down to look at a bit of a protest against done by Stop Killing Cyclists and Extinction Rebellion. Christian Wolmar was speaking against the removal of the lanes. Were quite a lot of police around saying that this was a gathering and people shouldn't be there. In fact, there was about 30 people who were all standing separately and being properly distanced. Go to this tweet with a short video from Fergal McCanty showing the police coming along and trying to stop Christian Wolmar from speaking. It's quite an interesting bit of video. Since that time, Better Streets for Kensington and Chelsea have said no one is giving up. The Daily Mail has weighed in and tried to get Labour MP Rupa Huq, who's opposing an LTN in Ealing, to say that cycle lanes are bad. And she said, no, they're good. Although whether she would say that if they popped up and made some of her constituents give up parking spaces is another question. The Mail on Sunday said, Andrew Gilligan, the Prime Minister's transport advisor, told the Conservative-controlled Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea not to remove the lanes, and even told the council that Johnson would ride his bike along them for a photo opportunity, because apparently he went ballistic. Then someone very carefully, and there's been some beautiful detective work, found this submission to a parliamentary committee from, guess what, the Daily Mail, who in 2018 asked Parliament for cycle lanes. And it's been suggested that one of their pals owns an e-scooter company or something. But anyway, so again, the opposition is bad. There's an open letter from Councillor Thalassites no, that's wrong. I clicked on it by mistake. Yeah, here we go. Councillor Thalassites saying lots of nonsense. We've seen a growing minority hurling abuse, making up false support, using logos and names without permission. I didn't know that. He says various things and says it isn't political and whatever. He remains committed to school streets and borough 20 miles an hour. I have had worries that school streets can be used as a bit of an excuse for not doing anything, but anyway, never mind. More importantly, also today, here's an article in Conservative Home from Tony Devonish, who's a member of the London Assembly and I believe leader of Kensington Chelsea Council. And I've put in some block emphases here, which are mine, not his, as with the Thalassites article, in which it just points out what an idiot he is, saying that everybody agrees that there should be a modal hierarchy with motorists last in line, but that isn't actually being pushed. He talks about taxing motorists putatively, which I think he means punitively, misspells the Labour leader's name, says the excuse offered for LTNs is that they'll improve air quality. Not really. The reason, one of them, is to provide alternatives to cars being used, and as has happened to be the case, as has been stated by the Conservative government. And he comes up with how most 80-year-olds and the disabled will struggle without a car. Plenty of disabled people and over 80-year-olds don't have cars. He says transport flow is an art, not a science. Actually, you can say a lot of things very scientifically about transport flow. He objected to the cycle lanes because they're double width, whatever that means. He seems to think that there's a specific width which is probably less than the recommended width. He says they've been enclosed in the wrong place, such as the embankment, which is generally regarded as being very successful. He says cycle quiet ways are far more in keeping with cycling demand in London, when exactly the opposite is true. A lack of consultation allowed Khan to increase the congestion charge. Actually, it was the Conservative government that instructed him to do that. When did being a motorist make you public enemy number one? Well, nobody's said that. In fact, motorists are the most privileged and very few people are actually opposing that, and so on and so on. So do have a look at that as being the kind of nonsense they're coming up with. And really, everything coming from the leadership of Kensington Chelsea Council has been rubbish. It's just not, cut the mustard. Here's your reading. I've rejigged the reading list. There's a lot there for all of you to get into. And on the consultations and surveys, very pleased to say that the hit and run petition has got to over 100,000, so that'll be talked about in Parliament. That's good. You can still sign it though. Legally binding UK air quality targets, that's going around. Greenpeace petition, Mums for Lungs petition, and Cycling UK asking you to get involved. So I've worked through pretty quickly, not doing any car adverts at the moment, just a picture of the Pedal Me Xmas tree. Pedal Me are very good cargo bike people in London, and you should all know about them. They're run by Ben Knowles and other people, very good, well-sussed people, and their latest thing is that they're delivering Xmas trees by cargo bike to people in London, so that's good. Okay, hope that was nice and quick.
So look, I mean, I think Rob sort of covered Kensington High Street pretty comprehensively, but I suppose very briefly, just to sort of bring everyone on the same page about what this thing was. And so for those of you not familiar with the place, Kensington and Chelsea, 207 kilometres of road, none other than this had a protected cycle lane. And so for decades, they've been fighting to avoid them. So there are no protected cycle lanes at all now in the entire borough. So that obviously impacts not only residents, but also those who inevitably have to travel in and out and through the borough. Located where it is, that's a hell of a lot of people. So this has been a key thing. They obviously blocked a sort of parallel scheme slightly to North Holland Park Avenue the year before. And people like us are sort of wise to their tricks. So when this thing came along, you know, we weren't totally naive. We were sort of happy to cooperate with as many stakeholders as we could, and we've done a lot of that over the last 18 months. But, you know, we knew that there are other interests who are kind of opposed sort of in principle to this. Tony Devonish, who's actually the GLA member for West London, is one of them. So the trial begins. We weren't, you know, we're expecting a few bumps along the way. It was not helped by some very intense roadworks, which happened about halfway into what became the shortened trial period. So I can imagine lots of angry residents stuck in traffic, looking at a cycle lane, thinking, well, there you go. So at the same time, you had Tony Devonish and a couple of others out campaigning against the cycle scheme because they don't want it. So that fueled probably a bit of noise. A little bit naively, perhaps, we thought the promised trial would be done. And it wasn't until we started smelling a rat a while ago. But so, for example, before the trial was put in, we, knowing Kensington and Chelsea rather well, we specifically requested that they should ask users as one of the people they ask about the trial. I mean, that seems pretty obvious, but they refused. And of course, that plays to one of the, I'm going to call it a trick. I don't think that's even an unfair word. One of the tricks they have used to block similar schemes is to restrict the audience to whom they ascribe a legitimate vote or a legitimate voice. So, so we knew that people were sort of being disenfranchised deliberately about views and inputs into this scheme. But it wasn't until 2 weeks ago that the that sort of battle began, if you like. So it was almost two weeks ago to the well, it was Wednesday morning 2 weeks ago, where we had the sort of public letter from Felicity Buchan, who's the MP for the area, and Tony Devonish. Felicity Buchan, newly elected MP, one contribution on cycling so far. That was to block the one on Holland Park Avenue. Our other parliamentary interventions on, let's call it green transport, have been to promote electronic vehicles. That's literally it. So we weren't particularly surprised. We knew this is a sort of political tag team going on. It's in the context of the mayor elections. Kind of, we get that. They also, of course, have their mailing lists that they can use to sort of try to stir up a bit of sort of opposition that then conveniently the political leaders can point to and say, ah, look. So they obviously needed some excuses because, as you probably all know, the scheme under their own data was working extremely well. So the data is on our website. The congestion was, and it's been confirmed by TfL bus times, congestion wasn't made worse by it. Cycling usage went up a lot. The counters apparently are now working. It's up to 3,000 a day, maybe 4,000. So working very well. So they think, oh, damn. So we've got something that works very well, but we don't want it. How can we justify getting rid of it? We need some excuses. I know, people are against it. Businesses are against it. So this is a little bit the shtick that was happening to it. Now, where they've miscalculated is the depth of actual real support for it. And having been very much part of the Holland Park Avenue sort of similar discussion last year, it was quite interesting to contrast the level and rapidity of support. And, you know, one feature I think has helped, you know, it's a sad thing, but COVID has given people in the area a view of, oh gosh, how nice their streets could be. And the sort of the exceptionalism that I think a lot of people in Kensington and Chelsea had about, well, it doesn't really apply, actually you had, you know, it's a very affluent area. You had lots of affluent people who were thinking, oh God, this is lovely. So we have had, so we've leapt into action. We've been helped by all sorts of fabulous people. Some are on this call, some are on Twitter, and not only it's sort of just stuff on Twitter, there's some exceptionally resourceful people on Twitter with great expertise. Thank you. There have been others from the local primary schools who got involved, some wonderful volunteers. So we've sort of put together in no time a bit of a crack team. And part of that's digital, part of it's this, part of it's that. And so what we thought, well, look, we need to show that there actually is support for this. And we've approached that in a number of ways. Some is institutional. So we've had very strong support from Imperial College. So Imperial College, top 10 global university, 23,000 students, and they have campuses which are at either end of this route. So for them, this is critical. And now their letters were literally unanswered by Kensington and Chelsea Council, because it goes with what I was saying, their trick of saying, well, look, if you're not technically a resident, your voice just doesn't count. So that's been quite interesting. Likewise, the museums, obviously everyone knows that we have these iconic museums and venues, Royal Abbot Hall, the Design Museum, so on. So gathering support from those, from local primary schools, I think made people realize that, and of course it's the first one you get is always the hardest, because you feel a bit sort of naked out there in the sun, you know. But once you get one, others have followed. And so whereas before in Holland Park Avenue, it felt like a bit of a solitary mission, now it feels, oh, I see. Gosh, all these rather long established institutions of the borough, and, you know, well, I mean, you know, they're not cycling lunatics. You know, these are very trusted, known brand names who are coming out in support. And in parallel with that, and again, we've had to sort of be quite hard working about our IT as well as everything else. We've been deluged with email, because we thought, well, fine. If you want to make it an email competition, no problem. So it's quite interesting, and I won't go into, and I'll shut up soon, but just to give you a flavor of the absurdity of everything, I think on the slides, it said the 1,000 sort of most recent emails. So it's worth sort of unpicking that for 1 minute, because it sort of shows you, it gives you a flavor of the shocking governance, which is why we've sort of started the pre-running to a judicial review, where they obviously were running a covert email operation to try to get some opposition so that they could present this then as unpopular. But anyway, even that didn't work. So even then, so they do an email thing. There's not a sort of advertised thing. There's no deadline set by anyone, but because they think, oh God, so then they randomly set a deadline that's not told to anyone. And at that random arbitrary point, the 25th of November, it's, oh, we've had 1,000 emails. And then in their key decision report, dated 1 week later, they say, oh yes, the last analysis, we had 1,000 emails, and yes, well, look, 58% were in favor, I know that, but anyway, we had some residents opposed, but fine. They also mention that subsequent to that, they had received but not opened a further 2,300 emails, and they had received, on top of that, more than another 1,000 emails that they hadn't even been able to count. So what they're sort of basing this on is they've found 322 emails of people who identify, in their words, as Kensington and Chelsea residents, against at least 10 times that number of emails they haven't opened. So, I mean, the list goes on. So as you can imagine, you have people now thinking, well, hold on, we're not happy that a perfectly functioning cycling scheme that cost £350,000 has been removed. And this goes across political divides. This isn't, you know, this goes across any kind of background issue. This, you know, and we see this in our mailbox, in our supporter base. It's very spread across the community. And equally, they're very upset about the way this has been done, because it's, you know, and that's one reason why we've begun the first steps of the legal action. Anyway, I'll probably stop rambling there before I go on for too much longer.
No, that was brilliant, Justin, to shed some light on it. It looks like there might be some issues with the way the consultation, or whatever it was undertaken. I mean, that's certainly like what's come through large and proper, like the fact that most residents seem to be against it, but if it's not done in a fair, proper, meaningful consultation, then you know they've got issues, and I'm hoping they address that and we can get what's fair. Yeah. So we're really good to have the insight into it. Like I'm sat like miles away, but we've all been following it.
No, thank you.
And at least nobody mentioned that van today, so I was quite happy to mention. Has anybody got any questions for Justin? I know he has to leave in a few minutes, so any questions or comments at this stage? Ruth, I was going to bring you in for last word, but by all means, come in now as well.
Well, only because Justin's got to go. So I've just spoken to the Urban Design Group this afternoon, and they'd posted a thing in their newsletter about councils can be found negligible for death or serious injury if they remove a cycle lane. If any of you sign up to their newsletter, it's very useful. And they're going to get in touch with you, Justin, and because they've raised that, a chap called Graham Smith has raised that because of this. Right, so that by removing this cycle lane, they could be endangering people's lives.
Yeah, it's definitely worth looking at. I mean, as a natural pragmatist, I've been hoping I'll just say it, hoping they'd just say, all right, we'll take it out over Christmas. Because then there's the Christmas argument, which I'd like to ask Justin about as well. Take it out over Christmas, and then we'll bring it back to finish off the trial. And I just don't know what your perspective is on the Christmas argument, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So they've, I mean, we're unpicking all of their nonsense. So there was this stuff about, well, look, you know, and it's an experiment, Christmas, very important trading period. Well, all right, well, let's check whether they've got any evidence whatsoever that it had any negative impact on business at all. And we haven't been presented with any. Now, that's slightly not surprising because it had a trial period of 8 weeks, 4 of which were during lockdown 2. So most of the premises were closed. Whether in the first few weeks they would have been able to sort of disaggregate footfall, basket size, dwell time on a comparator base, I'd be astonished. So it would have been odd had they had data to justify that. So of course they haven't. And then you dig a little bit further and you think, so these businesses are apparently opposed. Who are they? So we start unpicking. So there are 2 groups quoted. The Kensington-Chelsea Chamber of Commerce, that sounds like a sort of legitimate group, doesn't it? Well, turns out the chair, who they always quote, does have a business. It's just not in Kensington and Chelsea. The Kensington Business Forum, actually, their committee doesn't oppose it. And actually, how many of their members are high street premises? And did any of them oppose it? So we've been getting in touch with the businesses on the high street. We haven't found one yet which is opposed to it. So it's now some of them are still having to check with head office whether they're prepared to go on public record about that, because they're sort of, you know, they're chains, and, you know, understandably the store manager doesn't want to go out on a limb, and I totally empathize with that. But what is manifestly not the case is that they've done, you know, I mean, it really is scandalous, actually. So this nonsense about sort of business, you know, the implication is that the high street has sort of been furiously phoning them saying, please, 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 you know, this is making our life impossible. That absolutely is not what has happened. And, you know, it really is awful. But you're right. I mean, you would have thought that they would have, I had expected after, and I'd made the invitation to them, you know, many times, even in the last hours before they ripped it out, saying, look, guys, you need a sort of an excuse to sort of walk away elegantly. Don't talk about us. You can just say, look, Imperial College, Royal Abbot Hall, you know, these important stakeholders. Yes, we need to reflect. But they've sort of doubled down and doubled down in a slightly odd way. And at the same time, the sort of measured institutional support has been growing for it. And so while their rhetoric has become kind of more heated and even more sort of odd and incoherent, the moves for it have become sort of ever more evidence-based and considered, really.
Well, that's all we can do, really, isn't it? If you collect the evidence from the businesses, then that goes a long way. I remember it kind of reminded me a little bit of during the Olympics when they made parking free in the West End at the height of it, because they were worried that nobody was shopping because everybody had taken the hint to stay at home. And people do strange things based on assumptions, like during emergencies. So I'm still trying to put things in a nice part of my head, and all we can really do from our side, and most people in school, is collect the evidence and let justice be served, and
absolutely,
let's see what comes in. But like, we're all appreciating the efforts that you're putting in, Justin.
Oh, thank you.
So
Thanks.
Thanks for sharing with us.
Pleasure. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll let Justin jump off now. But yeah, much appreciated, and I'll bring Sally in, who's going to roll in. I'm sure we'll come back to a discussion on our favourite street in there.
Excellent. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Very nice to join. Thank you. Cheers. Bye. Bye.
Excellent. Sally, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm going to share my screen.
Yes. That'll work.
Can you see it?
Yeah, you're all good.
Slideshow. Right. So I've disappeared down a bit of a rabbit hole this week, looking at historic place streets in Newcastle, along with Alison Stenning, who's here as well on this call. And she's been looking at, for a while, at North Tynesyde's historic place streets. And it's actually, I kind of got, well, I've been interested in it, but I hadn't really done any proper investigating. But I'm actually, because I'm looking at 60s planning in Newcastle, it comes up in the development plan. So I then have sort of searched all of the newspaper articles for the second part of the 20th century, looking for evidence of street playgrounds, play streets in Newcastle, and found loads of stuff. So I thought I'm going to do a little bit this week, a little bit next week, so that I don't take loads of time up. But the tweet that I put out with this photograph on has had a lot of people retweet it. So I thought this is probably a good starting point. I think what we found, one of the things that we found is that there are a lot of particularly mothers who are protesting about traffic in streets, and different responses depending on where you are in the northeast. So I'm going to focus on Newcastle. But I will just start by saying that the first play streets in the northeast were proposed for South Shields in 1939. And I think they proposed to put in something like 43, as they say, 43 play streets. But almost immediately, can you see that? Almost immediately, there are complaints because people say, oh, that it'll be too noisy and it'll cause damage. Go down. In Newcastle, there isn't any campaign for play streets until the 50s. There are already play streets in North Tyneside in the 50s. Newcastle's quite late, but I found an article which said that there was an area in Heaton where parents were complaining about traffic on the street. And saying fast moving traffic is a real danger to children. You can see that's where that circle is there. So that's 1957. 1962, there is an announcement that Newcastle is going to get its first play streets. And actually in the 1963 development plan, there is a whole section on play streets. And it very much ties in with their plans for the redevelopment of the city. So they are going to go down a traffic and towns plan of comprehensive redevelopment of sort of the worst slum areas, most central motorway, and then the environmental neighbourhoods. But there's quite a bit of detail on the play streets. And I have just found today that there was a Ministry of Transport circular in 1961, which went out to all councils to say they encouraged street playgrounds, and that actually they should group streets together when they are putting in the orders. And this is obviously what Newcastle then intend to do, but it's very much part of their plans for developing different parts of the city. So Jesmond is an area that they have down for conservation. So this is, all of them are very, very sort of densely terraced houses, Tyneside flats, very little open space. So there's Jesmond, Heaton. Both of the Heaton Play Streets were in areas which were either going to be redeveloped completely, or they were going to be revitalised. So some properties removed and more open space made, but some of them kept. And Arthur's Hill and Benwell were both for comprehensive redevelopment. And I found a plan for Jesmond. So this is very much along the lines of Traffic in Towns, with all the different neighbourhoods, environmental units which wouldn't be permeable to traffic. And this is the little drawing of what these streets might look like once they've actually been done. But at the beginning, the idea is to put street playgrounds as a temporary measure, that eventually all these areas would be properly planned to have permanent infrastructure, so permanently semi-pedestrianised streets or pedestrianised streets, and more play space to spread out across the area, and more pedestrian facilities, full stop. But before even they put in the first application, there must have been news about these proposals, and straight away in Benwell there are complaints about the idea of play streets. This is before they've even had any, and the people there say that they do night shifts and they're older people, and they don't want it because it will be noisy and it will cause damage. So this is the other 4 circles in black are the other areas that are proposed, and they're all within about 2-mile radius from the city centre, so all quite close together. So the Benwell Play Streets don't make the cut. They're not in the traffic order that goes out. They fall before they even gets that far. The Jesmond ones are, but again, there's a massive backlash in Jesmond. And there are almost the whole of the 3 streets signs a petition to say that we don't want play streets here. The house prices would fall. It will cause damage. It will bring in people from outside who will be behaving antisocially. And there's even one article which says play streets are the very first step in the socialist framework before state control of all property. And so there's lots of very angry parents in the Cavendish Place, and many of them are parents, because apparently there are, in this one street, there are 53 children. So I think when we think about historic play streets and why they might have been put in, we sort of forget that already there are lots and lots of children playing out there. So it's a very different situation to the one that we're in now. So this is the final order that goes out for the play streets, and there are only 3 out of the 5. So even though this is a very different time, and I found very little to say that people were complaining about not being able to drive through areas, but lots and lots about just not wanting children and young people to be encouraged to be in the street. But on the flip side, there's also lots of people who are saying how dangerous it is, and obviously the statistics back that up. Because children were playing on the street, the levels of death and injury were phenomenally high. It's quite really shocking compared to what we're used to now. So really, I'm not going to say much more about that now, but I wanted to ask whether we still have some of these play streets still exist. So this is one of the Heaton Play Streets. You can see on the sign it says Play Street 8 a.m. to sunset, except for I can't remember what it says. And I know that the Minister of Transport wrote to councils in 2019 saying that to encourage them to run play streets. And one of the bits of legislation that they suggest using, in fact, the first bit that they suggest using, is Section 929 of the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984. And that's the kind of direct descendant from the very first street playgrounds legislation. So one of the things that Alice and I are quite curious to know is, are many local authorities actually using this legislation now to run play streets in their local authorities? It's not being used up here. what does it mean for things like sort of insurance? Because one of the things that seems to be a barrier for people running play streets, certainly in Newcastle, is that you have to have insurance. You have to have is it public liability insurance? And then the other things are any of the local authorities actually enforcing or enabling or encouraging the existing historic street playgrounds? So I don't know if anybody knows any of the answers to those. If anybody wants to let us know now, or put it in the chat, or get in touch with us, I'll put my email address in the chat. All right, and I'll finish off with saying a little bit more about street playgrounds next week.
That's brilliant, Sally. Tell you, I can give you one answer. I think it says access on that sign. Yeah, for access, Sally. Simon, do you want to come in?
So once again, I can do my mini Holland Waltham Forest spiel. Waltham Forest started doing play streets a couple of years before the mini Holland and then when the mini Holland landed, really went for it. So there's a simple form online. You can download it from the council, and you can just turn pretty much any residential street into a play street. It's then down to there is a whole kind of form on health and safety and kind of stuff that you have to fill out. But once you've got that, the council is then covering the public liability elements, and they kind of train with, I think, playing out. They train the volunteers to do it. What's really shocking to me, I lived on a street that had a play street every Sunday for years during the mini Holland stuff, is you'd have like residents as well as people trying to use Walthamstow Market who would just try and drive through wheelie bins, try and drive over cones, there'd be like loads of kids playing out, and there'd be people revving their engines and beeping their horns, and you'd just be like, this is insane. But yeah, there is clearly Waltham Forest, at the very least, if not probably a load of other London boroughs, have worked out the formal capabilities to do all this, basically.
Yeah, so we have that, and Alison runs the play streets in North Tyneside, so we have that up here, but this is a different thing. This is and I suppose this is my question really. It's a different piece of legislation. It says that the play street for the hours at either end can always be used for that. And I suppose my question, there is actually somebody asked a question in Parliament about those play streets, complaining about what some people are doing in them, and the response is that, well, it's just a street. I can't control what people do there. And so I suppose I'm interested in understanding what, all of that thing about kind of applying for stuff is a massive barrier, especially for parts of the city where they don't have the resources to do that kind of thing.
Excellent. I'll just let Ruth come in. She's got a hand up, and Simon, you're coming in about a minute's time anyway.
Hi. Sally, that was fabulous. Thank you for the historical references. It was great. I live in Chiswick, as people know, and in 2010, we were offered money, £50,000 from the European Right to Play Fund for the Children's Right to Play. We did a consultation. We got everyone in the street. We got them to pin maps on the wall, what they liked, what they didn't like. It was absolutely fantastic. They came up with a drawing, and then the vote was, do you want it in principle? And sadly, some people got hold of the idea that benches would bring alcoholics, paedophiles, and drug users. So it got thrown out. People who rented were allowed to vote. And if people didn't vote because they weren't here, it was counted as a no vote. So we lost the money. We lost being able to make my street access only, and I was absolutely gutted. But there is the European Children's Right to Play, and I don't know if the fund still exists.
That's a good one. Simon, did you want to come in now?
Yeah, so we have actually got a couple. I'm aware of a couple of permanent play streets with signs like that near schools in Waltham Forest. So they are used in that form as well. But as I just said in the chat, really, I think we got to a point where we were like, we can have one Sunday a month where kids play out, or we can have every day, every afternoon, all the time. And we just went that way. And I think, when you see, initially it was only the kids who were very, very middle class in Waltham Forest who were playing out near the closures. But now you see like kids playing cricket who are, Asian and all sorts of stuff. kids who haven't probably been outside for a whole generation being outside. And so I would say, you know, I hope that play streets are a gateway drug to more, basically.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, thanks, Ali. That was brilliant. Always great getting the historical aspect. I'm always told when I go to Salford that they did them first. So maybe I'll try and find someone who can pack it from Salford to feed in. I'll look forward to part 2 next week. Is that okay? Cool. Brilliant. Cheers, Ali. All right, yeah, Simon, over to you.
So changing the subject slightly, I was on an email conversation. Sorry, I'm Simon Munk, because people were asking the chat who was Justin. So I'm Simon Munk. I'm the infrastructure campaigner for London Cycling Campaign, and as you've probably gathered, Waltham Forest busybody and proud parent. So there was an email that went around between Brian and myself and a few other people about metro mayors and upcoming mayoral elections in 2021. And so I'm now going to kind of try and talk through a bunch of work that really isn't my work, but actually is probably more Brian's work than mine. In the tail end of 2019 and start 2020, London Cycling Campaign with Urban Movement did a report called Climate Safe Streets. That is, you know, was a kind of a tee up for what was meant to be our mayoral campaign for Sadiq Khan versus Sean Bailey and Sean Berry and the others. And then obviously COVID hit and the mayoral elections were cancelled for a year. So we've had another year of quite interesting progress and all sorts of sideways steps. And we know that other metro areas and other boroughs, you know, outside London are looking at, and some of the urban areas and the cities are looking at mayoral elections or council elections next year. And I think, you know, the kind of thing, and so there was a discussion about, well, are there common themes, you know, what should we talk about, etc. And someone mentioned Space for Cycling, which I thought, you know, I came onto LCC after Space for Cycling, which was an LCC kind of starting point that then went national. So we've kind of got a bit of a history at London Cycling Campaign for teeing up a campaign that then it turns out works quite well beyond London. And we had a very, very big discussion in 2019 about what we were going to, how we're going to theme the mayoral elections and what we were going to do. And a whole bunch of ideas got kind of tossed into the pot. And then kind of with a month to go before we had to really nail our colours to the mast, and having done focus groups with borough group campaigners and all sorts of things, we kind of got to this point where we were like, we had 2 on the table, and Fran, my colleague, worked up both of them really extensively. And then my boss, Ashok, who massively annoys me at times, but normally annoys me because he's actually blooming right, turned around and said, we're going to do climate. And the moment he said it, we were all like, that's just poured about 6 months of hard work down the pan, but it's absolutely the right topic to go for. So we started thinking very heavily about how all of the issues to do with the way we use our roads, who cycles, who doesn't cycles, how streets are designed, etc. All of these issues now increasingly kind of play out around climate, and climate has a real urgency, you know, and obviously I think now it has even more of an urgency after the year we've had. So we went back and looked at it a while ago. So we did the Climate Safe Streets report with Brian and Urban Movement and John Dales, who kind of authored the report for us or with us, and huge thanks to them because it's an amazing report. And so we went back at kind of in the last couple of months to look at that report again and said, is this right? Does this all still make sense in a new world with new changed priorities? Does this stuff all make sense still? And the simple answer is yes, it blooming does. So I'm going to do hopefully a shared screen, and I'll just very quickly talk through some of the kind of key strands. And of course, I'm starting on the wrong page already. Here we go. So I guess we've got 8 recommendations in the report, and I'll talk through them very, very quickly, and then we'll do hopefully some questions and stuff. But the idea here is that our view of what the 3 key asks and what the core priorities are, and our view of how we create mayoral asks for each of the others, you know, is going to be different to how Manchester might considerably do it, or how Leeds or you know, Edinburgh might. But these 8 items all still really stack up as key things that we need to start thinking about if we're going to tackle the way that roads transport impacts climate emissions. And I've put 3 as a magic number really partly because I was just ripping off some slides that I did a few weeks ago in a rush, but also because I'm really wary, and Ashok has, said it over and over again, and I totally agree with him. When you have like 10 asks or 15 asks or 25 asks for a mayor or whatever, everyone just gets lost. So have 3. Our 3 are the middle of this slide here. Hopefully you can see it. So they are a strategic cycling network, low carbon shared mobility, and smart road user charging. And so to run through those very quickly, a strategic cycling network, one of the great things we have in London, which I think we are now starting to see other cities get to, is data. Tons and tons of data. This is the strategic cycling analysis. There's been a new version of this done since the street space and COVID crisis. But, how quickly can we fill in the gaps to create a true network that enables loads and loads of residents, to get from door to door? The mayor, in his transport strategy in London, said we want 70% of Londoners living within 400 metres of a high quality cycle routes by 2041. Now, street space and the COVID crisis means we are on track to hit that way before then, but the climate crisis means we have to hit it way before then. Secondly, shared mobility, and this isn't just about Doctors e-scooters. This is, for us as LCC, this is quite an uncomfortable space to start talking about car share, and that's really quite a key thing for us to be able to talk about, because really what we want to talk about is making, your next car or your current car, your last ever private car. For the majority of Londoners, you do not, creating the conditions to say you do not need to live with a private car parked outside your house, because actually there's a car share van or a car around the corner, and there's Doctors e-scooters, and there's Doctors hire bikes, and there's cycle hangers, and there's all this other stuff. Core to our kind of views on this is this idea of having mobility hubs, so a car hire bay and a scooter bay next to each other, within hundreds of meters of your house. So every single Londoner should have access to some of this within easy walking distance, but also mainline stations, big stations, dotted around. Suburban transport interchanges should also have parcel collect and consolidation hubs and all sorts of other stuff as well. So we're working that up at the moment. Smart road user charging, I think the really interesting thing about this for metro mayors and the metro regions is the DFT, and Rishi Sunak is now, he's talking about this openly. So the question becomes, do you get your smart road user charging scheme in before the DFT, or the DFT get their smart road user charging scheme in and then take the revenue that they get from it? So I think smart road user charging, and for TfL and for the Mayor of London, obviously, this has now gone way up the political agenda more than it ever has, because, it's a choice of do this or have no fares for anything for a long time, and go bankrupt and bust and stuff like that, or expect a DFT bailout. Low traffic, I'm going to rattle through the rest of these. Low traffic neighbourhoods, we're seeing in boroughs in London now able to produce, Hackney have produced an entire plan for the whole borough. Numerous other boroughs have committed to an entire borough low traffic neighbourhood plan, every single residential area covered. Some boroughs have even committed to how quickly they're going to do them. So this is now an utterly achievable approach. Brian Deegan's amazing Greater Manchester workshops show how quickly you can generate these kind of ideas. Zero emissions public transport, fairly obvious. We can't have very, very heavy diesel buses if we're going to have low emissions. And we also need to start, jumping back, we also need to start talking about trains as well. Really, we need to get away from this idea that HS2 is an environmental disaster while not talking about the Thames Gateway crossing. We need to start having a serious conversation about how we reverse the beaching cuts and get trains back into the equation as a low carbon tool. Low carbon freight is the really hard one. That's really, really tough. And that's the big one. But we have to talk about demand management, consolidation, all sorts of tricks that Mike Barrett and his team at TfL are managing to do. And again, how can we get the mayors to start thinking more intelligently about what large vehicles do inside our cities, and how they enter? And adjunct to that is low carbon vehicles. Do we need kind of diesel taxis? Do we need Uber swarming everywhere, or do we need dockless bikes and things like this, the Quicab? So there are a whole bunch of other kind of things, but really what we need to be starting to talk about is not just swapping petrol and diesel for electric vehicles, because we know that if we do that, we don't solve all the other issues around it, including climate, quite probably, because the electricity demands are quite serious. Finally, from the 8, the last one is car-free planning. This is Marmalade Lane, I think, in Cambridge. But the idea that we are planning suburban areas and huge housing growth across the UK, with so much of it still planned on a kind of a car-heavy development, when actually what we need to do is say, if you're going to put down a development and you're out beyond the reach of public transport, you don't build car parking spaces, you build public transport, or you build dockless e-bike and scooter hire to get you in, or you build other ways of ensuring that these areas are accessible without needing a car. So that's the very quick kind of 8-point run through of Climate Safe Streets, the key points. The report is already out. You can see kind of where we're going with our mayoral ask, because it will be based around those 3 first ones. But we'd love to, as LCC, see other metro areas, other urban areas start to pick up this kind of mantle and take it on, as it were. And that's me.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Sam. That was
rattle through.
Yeah, you really did do that. Just sorted out the whole world in 10 minutes. Can't argue with that. Has anybody got any questions for Simon on that? Do we think that's the way to go? I know Don was putting in that Friends of the Earth have got their kind of climate ask for the mayors, so did a little bit of an advert for 7:30 tonight on that one. But like, is that it? Do we do more? Is it fast enough? A point I keep making is like, this is still the nice list. Every month that passes, these things are going to get harder and harder. If we're writing this report in 5 years' time, it's like, everybody stop now.
Yeah.
Into that.
On that, to jump in, there's a great, I wish I'd dig it out. There's a great quote from Joseph Stiglitz, who's head of the World Bank, who said, we have a choice of what type of landing we want. Do we want a really smooth, slow descent in, to the future, or do we want to just crash the plane straight into the tarmac? And that's really the choice. Totally agree.
How to roll out cycling everywhere, or how to bicycleize the world, were basically my questions when I finished my degree in transport and city planning at UCR. And this is also the time when when I met Brian and maybe some of you at Sustrans meetings. And to answer the question, I did actually some research while working in Amsterdam, and then 2 years ago I returned to Budapest, where I'm originally from, to support this transition. But actually, yes. So today I wanted to give you a quick update. I don't know if you remember our last talk on Remix, but we did actually do some improvements that we rolled out first in the UK. So that might actually help with the work that you guys are doing. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, just quick update. Yes, Remix is a San Francisco-based company, started back in 2015, and we already work with over 340 cities or transport agencies around the world, including actually Transport for London and Southwark Council as well in the UK. And actually our main goal is to provide tools to help reduce car dependency, tools to plan public transport networks, and design streetscapes that prioritize humans over vehicles. We basically do that by providing relevant geographic information, datasets, and design capabilities in one platform, which can also be shared with stakeholders or even consulted right there. So as I understood, at the Kensington High Street case, maybe that's where using our tool would have helped, to understand what the feedback was. So, but without actually giving too many slides, I just want to jump right into the tool. So maybe just change share. So this is an online web-based tool. As you see right here now, there's a map. I can bring in some data sets that's already loaded in. If there's or maybe actually the car for your household would be interesting, once you start planning something. so this is, kind of, if you work with geographic information tools, I guess it's not a surprise. What maybe, in addition, if you wanted to plan like, I don't know, new cycle lanes across, then I can just go from one side of London to the other, and it will find me the shortest path also within the tool once it actually comes up. I guess there's a bit of buffer delay. Oh, I took even the river. But the main point I actually wanted to show is the design capabilities. And maybe also do wait, let me just delete this. So maybe just one more thing on data. So if we just see maybe Kensington High Street, I'll just bring here. So what kind of data sets would come up there? Well, there's 29,000 people live there, but 55% without vehicles. So that's also maybe interesting to consider. But when it comes to design, let me just zoom in. So I don't know if you remember, so what we do at Remix, we basically can just click on any of the links and then create some kind of design, which will not be like perfect because it's probably not the right condition. But beside using a Bing aerial to actually figure out what's going on there, we also integrated the Ordnance Survey map, which just makes it very, very easy to understand what's the underlying condition, what kind of conditions I would be able to set up. So here I see that, well, it's probably like we don't have any parking there. And so here you see I'm changing some design, just clicking, and so it's fairly useful, especially seeing that, where, if I wanted to measure, of course, I don't know if you see, so now I can change the opacity. So I'm seeing the map, the underlying map as well. I could actually measure, what is the exact width. So it's sometimes it's 6.4, I think it was before. And in some cases, it's still, fairly American, and we're working on those. But the point actually here that to quickly design something that you can copy and paste to other areas. So let me just delete these. This, of course, of what we had, and I guess what's what we're looking for is something moving us to 2020. So changing one lane to a cycle lane, and maybe also add a bit of buffer. I don't know how the exact was before the ominous changes recently. But I'm basically just grabbing these cards and changing them to a bike lane. Now, given that the measures are there, it's correct, and I will give like a generous 2.2 meter cycle lane. And actually, I know that you guys didn't use any of these stride things. These are also kind of American. So these are things actually we can set in defaults as well. So then I will just override these and add I could go, of course, all the way to, well, all the way to Oxford, I guess, if I wanted to design all the way. I could also, of course, attend the intersections. Let's first maybe just remove these European-looking pedestrian crossings. If I wanted to also add some life to it, or let's see if let's make this like a low-traffic neighborhood here, maybe with a filtering. I split this segment here and change that maybe to cycle lanes. Probably add the island filtering in between. Of course, we can get rid of these parking lanes over there. So I see, I'm not.
I'm going to give you another 3 or 4 minutes to redesign London, if you don't mind, Peter.
Yeah, in 4 minutes, I'm not sure I can manage. But I see, it's not accurate, so I can also just, it basically helps you figure out, where, if you want to spend a lot of time on it, you can be very accurate. If you just want to visualize for the public, then you do that. And I think what you like as well, let me just share this link to the chat box. Where's the chat box? So now, not only you can all see the design that I made, but you can also comment on it. And those comments I will see, well, those comments, essentially you can comment on the relevant location. So you're going to be seeing these little icons. You can place your icon wherever you want. And then, you can leave whatever thoughts you have. So essentially, that way we are engaging the public, but also I will be seeing those. So for example, if there's a collaborative need, and then I can also discuss that with colleagues while still being on the map within the design. If, of course, we want to make it a bit more lively, you can probably want to add a lot of cyclists. Just move it up. And you can stamp any picture basically that you would want to have. So and it could be, of course, trees or bollards, or I guess there's not much I can show in a few minutes. Maybe if anyone has questions, because I keep wondering like how councillors or even advocacy people, how do they I don't know, design these things? I saw Brian, one of your tutorial videos working with a Google map.
I know, yeah, I would have done it in this. You haven't given me access yet though. But like for me, this is I mean, this is the future, like the holy grail of design, to be able to just do it lightning quick with people on their streets. It's just like that's why I love you coming in and doing these demos, Peter, because this stuff is so golden. It's like to work there with people. Okay, well, we got this much space. We can try that. We can try that. So, I do a lot with street mix and trying to get those profiles over. But to go along the street, oh, that's my business. Oh, watch that one. Okay, we'll keep that there. But that means everything has to go over to the next parallel street. It's just a really good way of live designing. So has anybody got any questions for Peter on it, or any comments on it? You can see what he's doing. It's basically like a street mix that snaps itself straight onto the street with the exact dimensions, and you can cross-reference it to aerial. I'm doing the sales pitch for you here, Peter.
Yeah, I think you're doing it better than I do.
He's such a great tech guy. I have to do that. Has anybody got any questions for Peter on this? I'll ask him one. How are you getting on with junctions, Peter? Can you do an instant Cyclops yet?
I think so. Yeah, we're getting very, very detailed now. So there's also, let's maybe zoom into one junction. So here, for example, you have an island on the junction, and well, I just extend the island over there. There's quite a few detail you can do, so it's kind of like up to you how much you want to put in. If you want to, be very, very detailed, then you can do that as well. If you don't, for example, here, this build out, you can also do those, but if you don't want to, then you don't have to. So essentially, it's really up to you how much detail you want to put in.
Yeah, trust me, what Peter just did with one click then, that's taken me the part of 25 minutes to do and measure and get it all in there and really get a topographical survey and if I really want to get it accurately, but that's pretty good levels of accuracy. I think we might, go on Peter, have you got any last things to share with us? Because
yeah, just if you, once you hear, you can press J, OK, or I don't know if you have access to the other ones. I was playing around this afternoon just to see, if I didn't know if the Kensington High Street had like floating bus stops before, or what designs you had, because I didn't realize, maybe the buses were the main reasons, they kept up vehicle traffic, but I could even imagine that for the time being, it could be also a way to just say, okay, then the cyclists should be waiting behind the bus stops. But that's again, it just becomes very, very political.
Dave, I would let you in, but your mic's gone mad again, so I have to keep on.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I keep muting you every time, Dave. Sorry, you're just coming through as a big snowy white noise. But yeah, cheers for that, Peter. Really interesting. I think we've got a couple of minutes left, so leave that picture there because it's definitely the star of the moment. Kensington High Street, it's all on our minds, and I wanted to do our Ruth. I've kept you waiting right till the end. But if you have any final words for us on the subject of the day or anything in general?
I was reading quickly because I was asked to look up somebody's tweet, and I won't say whose it is, but she says, thanks, blah. As a cyclist, I totally support cycle superhighways, but blocking local side streets has been so controversial, polarizing, allowing all to say would be a way forward. What I liked about the image that you've just done, Peter, was the desire line of the crossings of the zebras, always right on the corner, whereas historically a lot of them have been set back, and the wide open mouth and everything, all of which gives a problem to older people when they're walking, that kind of stuff. And there's often a comment about how few women there are on this. I think it's so important that we stop talking about cyclists and we talk about people cycling, we talk about shopping by bike, we talk about taking children to school. It is important and people might dismiss it, but it really, language does count. And I feel that anyone who says as a cyclist, but that they're always going to be negative about anything that's being proposed. So that's my say for today.
You can never beat Ruth's last word, so I think we should probably start winding it up there, unless anybody else.
Yeah. Can I just a quickie, just back up Ruth on that. I was thinking about this when Simon was putting up his 8-point plan and everything, that for years we've had this thing that, we mustn't be confrontational, we mustn't tell people that people have to get out of cars, we've got to be sort of super nice and provide alternatives first and so on. And actually what we see is that when you get something in like Kensington High Street, which is really not taking away a lot of capacity from motorists or anything like that, you still get this pushback. And frankly, we've got to accept that we're always going to get this, that people saying, oh yeah, I do support cycling and walking, but they will always say that the moment you are actually even questioning, let alone actually threatening motorist privilege. And I think we actually have to be more forthright and more definite and say, yes, this has got to happen. And if you don't like it, what's your alternative? So that's my little say.
All right, Simon, I'll bring you in, even though you're ruining my last word from Ruth section, but I'll let you come in as well. But that was brilliant, Ruth, by the way.
I think to Bob's point, we have to be really clear that we have to move forward, but we also have to stop and think for a second. 90 LTNs, 90 kilometres of cycle track in London in the last 8 months alone. You know, hundreds of school streets, hundreds of filters. You know, we've seen an unprecedented shift, and a lot of that stuff has caused no controversy at all. There's a whole bunch of schemes I'm not going to mention on here or anywhere else at all that have slid past with no one getting worked up about them. But similarly, the schemes that I think, you know, the MP that Ruth and I are not talking about, you know, those schemes have passed their peak. The schemes in Lambeth have started kind of going quiet on controversy. They're bedding in. There are loads and loads of schemes that had controversy for a little bit, and because the councils were just tough enough, just strong enough to tough it out, they've got through that. And I think that's the other thing to recognise, is actually the reason why Kensington High Street failed is because the politicians in Kensington and Chelsea had no political will to do this in the first place. And so it was always going to be a really tough fight there. But, you know, look at elsewhere in London, and there's even boroughs that haven't traditionally had lots of political will are toughing out schemes and starting to see massive results, and the controversy is dying out. So we don't necessarily have to have a fight in every place.
Well, hang on a minute. Okay, right. Really, because I get the last word. I have family in Harrogate, and it took 10 years of polite bargaining to get one scheme across the Stray in Harrogate, which is now almost anyone who lives up there or goes there has got to go and have a look at it. We shouldn't be waiting for 10 years, because in those 10 years, too many children will get killed, too many old people might not get on a bike. We've had enough of just being nice and quiet and polite, and I think we have to be a lot stronger. Last word.
I really want to say something, but that is the last word, so I'll call it a day there. Albeit, I know I've got to just say, I don't think it's over with Kensington High Street. I think it's just on a break.